Joining us is Carl Za, and we are going to be talking about China, its rise, the effect it has had on its neighbors, and U.S. efforts to contain it. Now, after this live stream, I'm going to post an edited version of this with the rest of my videos on my channel. Carl will possibly post it on his channel. So if you see it pop up again, that is the reason why. YouTube separates live and regular videos, and a lot of people don't see the live unless they tuned in for it. So just to let people know that ahead of time, because I've seen comments of people say, Brian, this is a repeat. I already saw this. It's because we're trying to get around the way YouTube organizes videos. Anyway, welcome, Carl. How are you today?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for inviting me. I wanted to do this with you for a long time, ever since we actually met in Bangkok. I kind of want to talk about my trip, my impression of Thailand and Southeast Asia in general, and then we can talk about all these craziness around, Trump tariff war and how that's impacting China's neighborhood in Southeast Asia, and we can go from there.
Carl, you were born in China, but you were raised in the United States. I was born and raised in the United States. And then since then, we have both made the decision to live our lives here in Southeast Asia. You have gone back to China. I've, in the past, visited China. I've traveled elsewhere here in Southeast Asia. And so it will be an interesting conversation to compare notes as to how things have changed over the years. I have been in Asia almost my entire adult life. When I was in the U.S. Marines, I was based in Japan for almost 3 years. And then as soon as I got out of the Marines, I went straight back to Asia. I was in Thailand, Singapore. I've traveled through Malaysia, Laos. And you have been in Bali, Indonesia, but you've traveled around Indonesia. And you just came here to Thailand, where we met. And you told me the last time you were here was all the way back in, I think, 2003. And that was actually around the time I first came here. And things have changed so drastically since then. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how it was then. We can have a conversation about how it was then and the impression it made on you now.
I came actually 1 year earlier than that. I came in 2002. I went to Phuket and then the PP Island, but I also made a stopover in Bangkok. At that time, my impression of Bangkok is kind of what I expected. It's straight out of like old Vietnam War era movies, and you have I saw like rats scurrying around in the streets. And I remember 2 o'clock in the morning, I went downstairs from the apartment I was staying in to get some snacks at 7-Eleven, and I saw an elephant walking down the street. This is downtown Bangkok, so this is like not the outskirts. This was downtown Bangkok. So imagine my surprise coming back 23 years later, and I saw so much development. I mean, Bangkok has really cleaned up. Bangkok has a very nice, clean, efficient metro system, which I took to meet you. I took a picture. I noted how not only they were new, but all the trains that have protected barriers. So you can't push people onto the train tracks like they do in New York. And the floor is immaculate. And then people are polite. People, I mean, compared to U.S. especially, Thai people are super polite. It's just nice. I mean, everything is just nice. And we met in a mall actually, and the mall is just like a mall everywhere, but it's full of consumer goods. There's signs of a burgeoning middle class everywhere. We also check out the BYD showroom in the mall because I wanted to compare prices, how much they're selling in Bali versus Bangkok. But yeah, and there was and we came across these a boys band playing to like crowds of teenage girls, So this is kind of like the same across the world, but it's still quite different from Thailand 23 years ago when I first visited. Back then, Thailand was still developing, but now, I would say, Thailand is quite, I mean, in terms of infrastructure, in many ways, you already surpassed the United States, especially in Bangkok. And like everything is so convenient. I was walking like in the CPD district, kind of like very heart of Bangkok. I'm just, looking for food in the morning, and around like 6 o'clock in the morning, they will have like food vendors lining up on the street. They were packing up like bento boxes for office workers who are coming in. The food is really cheap. They're really good, but all of them have a QR code you can scan. So you just do mobile payment. Like all these street food vendors have QR code. You just scan and then you pay. And before I only saw that in China, but this is prevalent in Southeast Asia now, also in Indonesia, and which we can maybe talk about the Trump tariff, because it turns out the details of the Indonesian trade negotiation with United States have been leaked. One thing that U.S. didn't like is actually those localized QR code mobile payment system in Southeast Asia. It specifically said, the Indonesian mobile payment system, it benefits the local vendors, and they want Indonesia to get rid of that and replace it with switch to the MasterCard and Visa system. I mean, this is not about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. This is just about financial domination, like what they always try to do. But what I have, and another thing I saw about Thailand, immediately after I left the Bangkok airport, I saw like 4 or 5 giant billboards advertising cars, car ads. And all of them are Chinese, like Chinese brands that people back home in US would never heard of, the Great Wall Motors. They may have heard of BYD, but there's a Deepal, there's MG. Oh, they may have MG because it was a British brand and then bought out. But anyway, the thing is, there's so much more options available now to the Thai consumers, and there's definitely a large a middle class. Like during the trade talks, people in Washington, like the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he will say something like, they need us because we have the money. They need us to spend to buy their goods. Like, no, man. People in Asia, they're getting wealthier and wealthier. They can afford their own goods. They can afford the product they themselves make. So that's my initial impression of Thailand. I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and I have been here since 2003, and I think the first time I came here was around 2002. That was with the military. And when I actually moved here was 2003, 2004. And yes, Bangkok was, I think it was convenient. It was comfortable, but it's certainly, when you compare then to now, it's made a quantum leap. And yes, there were literally elephants walking in the streets. People would bring the elephants into the city, and they would go around to tourists and get them to buy food to feed to the elephants. And all of that has been gradually phased out. I saw a comment in the comment section talking about kind of the seedier types of tourism that Thailand has a reputation for. This has been gradually in decline for many years. And if you were to come here and look for it now, you'd be very disappointed. It has shrunk to just like 1 or 2 streets in the big city. And yet these island places where a lot of Western tourists go, it's because it caters to mainly Western tourists. And Western tourists have been in severe decline over the years. The largest amount of tourists come from China, more than all Western countries combined. And then the next largest group after Chinese tourists are tourists from the rest of Southeast Asia. And you could see that the signs used to be in English and Japanese, and now you see more signs in Mandarin, but also Russian, because I think the largest group of, I guess you could categorize them as Westerners, is actually from Russia, not Europe, not the United States. So there's been a shift in that. And a lot of people have a misconception that Thailand is a tourist country. It depends on tourism. Carl, you were saying how Scott Bessent is saying they need us, they need our money. A lot of Western tourists come here and they strut down the street. They think they could do anything they want. And when people are like, what are you doing? You can't do that. And they said, if it wasn't for me, you would all be in the jungle digging for bugs in the ground to eat. And it's like, no, like Carl, you saw the mall that we met at. I'm not going to say where it was because we're both on all kinds of lists, but it was way outside of Bangkok. It's not even technically Bangkok. It was another province. The urban sprawl reached there. It was, I would say, suburbs. You were talking about a burgeoning middle class. As you leave the city, you can, well, in the city, you have these huge condominiums that people in the middle class working in the city are living in with their families. And also housing developments, all as you leave the city and you're in the suburbs. And so this was a huge shopping mall. It's not even in Bangkok. Some people say, well, that's the capital, so that's the reason why. But you could find places like this in the city center of every province, everywhere you go. So there's been a huge change. But Carl, my next question to you is, if it wasn't for the rise of China, do you think the United States and Europe would have helped Thailand and the rest of Southeast Asia develop in this way? Do you think this is because of America's benevolent grace that Southeast Asia has risen, or is this because it has risen together with China?
Well, I mean, you mentioned that kind of the superior attitude of Western tourists in Southeast Asia, and you mentioned about like the seedier side of tourism. That actually started with U.S. military. Start during the Vietnam War, because at that time the American GIs, they will take their R&R to places like Bangkok, and that's when like the sex tourism industry really started. It was started to cater the American GIs, on their vacation away from Vietnam, and that's kind of like the stereotypical image of Thailand in like the Western imagination. But what China has done, what the rise of China has done is, first you made a lot of consumer goods readily available. For example, here in Bali, our babysitter, she has an Oppo phone, and like before China come to the scene, smartphone was not affordable. It was not affordable to many people in Southeast Asia. It's China and the Chinese brands that made these smartphones kind of like the common household items. And now every teenage girl can have a smartphone, have an Oppo or Vivo. And I imagine similar process was happening in Thailand as well. And also the amount of infrastructure that I saw, infrastructure development I saw. I know Thailand currently they're in talks about building a high-speed rail to join up with the China-Lao railway, and
it's under construction already. Just so, yes, to update it.
And that will enable that's basically kind of the Pan-Asian rail network dream that has been in existence for a long time. The idea is you would be able to take a train in China, travel all the way through Southeast Asia, to Bangkok, and eventually even to Singapore. And that dream is coming to fruition right now, as China is investing in many of these countries in developing their infrastructure. Most notably the China-Laos railway that's already on the border of Thailand, and it's already connecting with like the existing rail system of Thailand, but now Thailand is upgrading it to a high-speed rail. So one day you can take a high-speed rail from Bangkok out to the Laotian border, and the cars, like I mentioned, I saw maybe 1 or 2 Teslas in Bangkok, but I saw so many Chinese EVs. And this is, again, it's because the Chinese car manufacturers have made EVs affordable. EV is no longer like like a luxury item. It's not something that's more expensive than gas cars. And I was actually jealous because we don't get as many models in Bali than you guys do in Bangkok. You have all the Chinese car manufacturer there. BYD opened a factory there in Thailand, because Thailand is auto kind of the auto manufacturer center of Southeast Asia. A lot of Americans would know this because they only know Thailand for like sex tourism. They didn't know that Thailand have a burgeoning auto industry, or like they're moving up the value chain now. That they're talking about manufacturing chips and stuff like that. And this is everywhere I travel in Southeast Asia, Thailand. I've been to Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. Everywhere is booming. I like to say the Asia century is already here. That you can see the results all around you. I highly encourage people from North America, whether you're in Canada or US, come travel, come to see Southeast Asia. Many other people from the rest of the world do. On my plane from Bali, there was a Kuwaiti couple that was sitting next to me, and they just finished their vacation in Bali, and they decided to spend a couple of days in Bangkok. I asked him, "Oh, why did you choose Bangkok?" And the guy said, "Oh, I love it. Because Bali is still like kind of the place you experience nature and culture. Bangkok is a modern city, where we can do a lot of shopping. They spend 2 days. They allotted 2 days just to go shopping in Bangkok. It's a happening place. People, because the physical location is pretty far from the U.S. mainland, so not many people are aware of it. But for many people in Asia, in particular, they already know Bangkok is a happening place. And I just find out Pepe Escobar actually has a place in Bangkok. I didn't even know that. He was kind of partially based out there because he started his career, I guess, for writing for Asia Times, which was a newspaper based out of Bangkok, Thailand.
Yes. So a couple of things that you were talking about. I have noticed larger and larger numbers of Chinese manufactured cars on the road here. Obviously, when I first got here, it was Japanese cars. And then you saw a large number of American cars, because not because they were importing them from America. And I remember there was an auto manufacturing crisis in the US, and then there was the car bailout. And I remember warning people, family back in the US, because they were talking about, we're not going to close these factories in the US, but I saw them building the factory here. I'm like, of course they're going to close it there because they're moving it here. And then they did. And over the years, you saw Japanese American cars, and then suddenly you started noticing MG, and then the Chinese electric vehicles, and now you see them absolutely everywhere. And there's charging stations absolutely everywhere. And it's not just a huge shift, but it's happening very, very rapidly, much faster than change has occurred over the entire period that I've been here. And I think that's part of, because the acceleration of China's rise, but also the acceleration of technological research development. So there's a lot of these things coming into play. Mobile phones, exactly, like there's so many people here now. I use Huawei. I still use Huawei. I've learned to live without Google being on my smartphone. A lot of people have Xiaomi. This is an extremely popular smartphone.
I have Xiaomi.
And there you go. And they're as capable, if not more so, than Apple, and they're so much cheaper. And so a lot of people still get Apple phones here, iPhones here. It's more like a status symbol than any sense, of any form of practicality. And that's what Western products really have been reduced to. They're a status symbol for people, but in terms of practicality, improving the everyday life of people here in this country and in the region, is the rise of Chinese manufacturing, the overcapacity, as the US calls it. I would call it abundance, and it has materially improved the lives of everybody here. I'm trying to think of, you were talking about infrastructure here. I talk to my brothers back in the United States often, and he's always going through areas where there's no coverage, and he complains about how expensive his monthly bills are for telecommunications. And we compare notes about, what I'm paying, what he's paying. My wife has like all of these different plans, and even you add all of them up, it's still less than what he's paying for just one plan. And why is that? Is it does telecommunication just for some reason cost more in the US? Or is it because there's two completely different systems at play here? And I wanted to ask you about a little bit more. We're talking about Thailand, but you're in Bali and Indonesia, and you've traveled around there. How have you seen developments improve there? And aren't there Chinese joint Indonesian Chinese infrastructure projects there? And what's the impact been of those?
Actually, there is a power plant north of Bali that's been built by China. That's providing electricity on the island. So I mean, and all the right now we are live over the internet is because Huawei built out 4G network here. They already have 5G in the city center, Denpasar, but I live out in the boondocks, so I don't get 5G. I only get 4G. And because I live in the jungle, we are the first, like only third houses in the whole area. So like the electric company, they don't build lines to for like the cables for internet. So I had to basically rely on like similar to mobile data, but still working. We are still talking, and this is because of Huawei. And and now a lot of Chinese company are coming to Indonesia to they're investing in nickel mines, because traditionally Indonesia serve as a raw commodity producer. It exports raw commodity and receive manufactured goods. So what Indonesian government is trying to do, they're trying to encourage local manufacturing. They banned the export of Indonesian nickel. So now a lot of Chinese investors are coming in to set up refineries in Indonesia to refine nickel locally, because nickel is used in the in the lithium ion batteries for EVs, for example. So that's a very important critical resource. So there's tons of Chinese investment around that. And this is the thing, U.S. is trying to force countries in Southeast Asia to pick a side. It's you're either with us or against us. But they're really trying to want them to pivot away from China. But U.S. is not offering alternative, right? U.S. is not saying, here, take a shitload of money. Here, take this bag of money. This will be your compensation for cutting off China. But no, United States is not doing that. Instead, they slap tariffs. They just say, okay, if you do what I say, I'll think about scaling back the tariff. It's all stick, no carrots. This is why Xi Jinping recently was touring through Southeast Asia, and he was getting red carpet treatment. And not only that, ASEAN, which is an organization of all Southeast Asian countries, recently their trade representative met with a trade representative from China, Japan, and South Korea. And they just made an announcement. They're going to form like the biggest free trade bloc. And they made a joint statement condemning Trump tariff, and they're opposed any unilateralism. And they're going to they place emphasis on. So by the way, this is huge, because if you look at China has 1.4 billion people, Southeast Asia has somewhere around 680 million people, Japan has like more than 100 million people, and Korea has 50 million people. So altogether, you have more than 2 billion people living in this zone. This is new free trade zone. This is a giant economic bloc, and East Asia is already, where most of the economic activities are in terms of global trade. So, but by the way, this is also another reason why United States want to insert itself into stuff like the South China Sea dispute, because they will say, oh, we're here to guarantee a free and open Indo-Pacific. We're here to safeguard the vital trade lane. But they don't tell people the vital trade lane, it's where 80% of the traffic is to and from China, and so essentially U.S. Navy's claim is they're in South China Sea to guard this vital sea lane of China from China, which is completely ridiculous, right? And this region is going to be even more tightly integrated with the Chinese supply chain. because a lot of the, as China's economy is moving up the value chain, they're also shedding a lot of more labor intensive industry like textile, and they're moving to Southeast Asia like Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. And also this is also accelerated by the US push for decoupling from China. So a lot of the Chinese factory as well as the foreign multinational, they're moving their supply chains to places like Vietnam. But the reason they chose Vietnam is precisely because it's proximity to China, because it's very easy to access the Chinese supply chain. So in essence, the Chinese supply chain just expanded to the rest of Southeast Asia. All these factories, they still depend on China for machine tools, for parts. This is why it makes sense to move to, say, Vietnam, or rather than say India, because Vietnam will be a lot closer. But one of the result of the, by the way, you talk about iPhone is still made in China. 80% of iPhone is still made in China, and only the Americans are now, they're going to get a different version, because Tim Cook said, okay, well, to satisfy the tariff, we're going to move just enough production to India, so the Americans will get a special made in India iPhone. The rest of the world will continue to get regular iPhone made in China. And this is the same for many Western brands, even luxury brands. So what people are really paying when they buy Western brands, you're paying for the brand and marketing, right? It's still made in China. Everything is still made in China by Chinese labor in Chinese factory. It's like they just slap a Western brand on it and you bring a huge premium. Chinese make about $60 on every iPhone produced, right? Majority of the profit is being captured by Apple, because the Apple brand. So a lot of people are now starting to wake up to that fact. They're seeing the videos on TikTok where they show all these luxury bags, all those of Louis Vuitton bags. They're mostly made in China. They just slap the European luxury brand on it, and suddenly they have to pay top dollars for it. So this is the world we are. When you're paying goods, you're paying either made in China goods with Chinese brand, which is a lot cheaper, or you're paying for made in China goods with a Western brand, which you pay shit tons of more premium for.
All very good points. The point of moving manufacturing to Southeast Asia, but still relying on supply chains emanating out of China. I wanted, because now we're moving into U.S. versus China territory, and I just wanted to make one more comment about the cost of living. I have family back in the U.S. Carl, I'm sure you know plenty of people back in the U.S. The cost of living is spiraling out of control there. Here, every day I realize how lucky I am. The cost of living is so low here. Everything is so affordable. I'm not Thai, so I'm not covered by Thai universal healthcare. Thai people are, the rest of my family here is covered by that. But if I have to go to the hospital for something and I have to pay out of my pocket for it, I could still afford it. There are things that we have had to pay for at the hospital out of pocket that if this happened in the US, I would be living under a bridge and fighting with a stray dog for my dinner. So just that alone, it should be a wake-up call. But a lot of Americans, they don't understand this. They think whatever's happening in the US is happening everywhere, and they're the lucky ones, and everyone else is living under even worse conditions. The image that they have in their head of Southeast Asia is very different Sure.
I want to add on to that, because because kind of now I think about healthcare in U.S. My mom still lives in North Carolina, and her doctor just told her it seems like her bladder is like dripping or something. They told her to get a scan, right? Like they told her to get a scan, and so she tried to sign up for scan, and it's like 3 months. She has to wait 3 months just to get a scan and to get a test. Whereas here, I just recently, because I am covered, because through my wife, I'm covered by local insurance. So recently, I had a minor surf accident. I got caught in a really big wave, and the wave slammed the board really hard against my head, and I had a minor concussion. And so I was a little bit worried. So I wanted to, they told me, okay, just get a scan, just in case, get a scan of your brain, making sure everything is okay. I walked in and got done this, the same day, not the same day, just like a couple hours later, it's done. I mean, like, and I paid nothing. It was all covered by insurance. I mean, that's amazing. This thing does not happen in the United States. And also my, I used to make, decent money working IT back in the US, but still I was not able to afford a house in LA because it was just out of my reach. Like I just would not be able to afford a house by myself, at least in the neighborhood I want to live in. and whereas now, in Bali, I'm making a tiny fraction of what I used to make, but I have a very nice. I'm able to support a family of 4, and I have my own house, my own car, and I don't need anything else. I mean, maybe like okay, in US maybe I can afford to go on more vacation, but really I didn't have enough vacation time to do that. But here I'm very content, very happy in terms of affordability. I mean, there's no comparisons. Southeast Asia, great food, great price, and that's why I'm not leaving. I'm not returning back to US. I'm putting my roots in Bali here. This is my island now.
Yes, and we are both people that have had the experience of living in both places, and this is the decision that we've decided to make, and it seems to me such an obvious decision. My wife's family, they're not rich people, but her father owns a house, her sister owns a house, they have cars, they have everything that they need, they live very comfortable lives. When they get sick, they can go to the hospital and they get treated right away. They're not on long waiting lists to get basic treatment. They get it right away. And even if the hospital you registered at, for some reason, there's some kind of hang up, you go to another one, you could afford to pay for it out of pocket. And that's what society should be. It should be a place where everybody can live together and have a comfortable life. It should not be this zero-sum competition where there's winners and losers, and the losers are always teetering at the edge. And this is kind of an extension of the system China has. China has a system like this. There's the concept of common prosperity built into their legal system. Companies have to serve a purpose. They cannot just pursue profit blindly. And you see a lot of this there's a mix. Like, the economies aren't purely capitalist, they're not purely communist. There's a mix, and it's very practical. And it reflects that. I'm not saying there's not corruption, there's not bad things happening. Of course, there are. But the basic idea is that society should serve everybody living in it, not just a small handful. Of course, there's a handful of people who are extremely wealthy and well off, but everyone else can live a very comfortable life. So it's very important to constantly harp on that and show people there is an alternative system. It is being used in many places around the world, and life is demonstrably better, visibly better. You can see it every single day in your life. Now let's move more toward, and you were talking about so let's talk about the United States, which is on the other side. If you have a globe, you're Southeast Asia, you have to turn the globe 180 degrees around. It's literally on the other side of the planet. And yet the US is so deeply involved here in this region. And as you say, Carl, they have no alternative to offer. They say, you can't do business with China. You're not going to do business with China. We will ruin you. We will burn your country to the ground. They're burning Myanmar to the ground right now, as a matter of fact. Here in Thailand, we talked about all the good things. In 2009 and 2010, there was horrible violence in Bangkok. There were militants with war weapons backed by the U.S. fighting soldiers. Could you imagine that, Carl? RPGs and AK-47s in these places where you shop. And people look it up. There's videos on YouTube of, because then they lit everything on fire as they were retreating from the from the Thai soldiers who were trying to get it back under control. It was horrific, and this was all U.S. backed. It's the color revolution model that they were trying to use here. because they could see this happening. They could see the whole region working out from under US hegemony and working closer and closer with the rising China. And so just for an example, the high-speed rail line is under construction right now here in Thailand. They have a new central station separate from the current central station. And that's where the high-speed rail line will run out of, from Bangkok to up north to Laos, as you mentioned. And you could already see the elevated line in some places already well underway. The US-backed political party led by this billionaire, well, he's not a billionaire, his mommy is a billionaire, and he's just the son. And he was talking about, we need to stop, we're too close to China. We need to be closer to the US, Europe, and Japan. And instead of wasting our money on this horrible high-speed rail line, which moves billions of people every year in China, we should invest in the Hyperloop. I don't know if people even remember the Hyperloop. And he went to Nevada. He has this video on his political party's YouTube channel of him looking at this rink-a-dink toy, basically, not even a real prototype. And then he came back and he did this big, long presentation in Thai about how great it would be, and how this is going to catapult Thailand head and shoulders above everyone else who's too dumb to work with the US. They're too busy working with China. And then what happened? That whole project got closed down and went absolutely nowhere. It didn't move a single passenger anywhere in any actual capacity. And now Thailand continues on the path with the high-speed rail line that will connect with the rest of China. And what does that tell you? What does that little story tell you? It tells you the US has artificial alternatives just to sell something to the people, to get them on board, sell them this fantasy that they know will never materialize. And what they're actually offering is nothing. They're offering you stagnation, destitution. And we always talk about this, Carl, and this is, and then I will let you talk about where you think US-China tensions are right now, especially in this tug of war over Southeast Asia. They want to dominate the world. This whole tariff plan was encapsulated in Project 2025. The chapter was written by Peter Navarro, who's now in the Trump administration overseeing it. And the opening sentence is not about, we need to make America great, we need to reindustrialize America. The first sentence is about how the US is the dominant superpower and needs to remain the dominant superpower, and we have to stop China from taking our place. And so that's what this is all about. And how do you exercise dominion over the rest of the world when you're only 4.5% of the global population? You don't do it by outcompeting everyone. That is impossible. You do it by dividing and destroying everyone else and ruling over the rubble. So